I love this city so much. We have incredible potential in terms of the intelligence, the creativity, the spirit of innovation, shared progressive values, and tremendous wealth that we're generating. And I felt like we are just not getting ahead of these challenges, and we need someone who understands urban growth, who has the courage and the backbone to stand up to special interests, and understands solutions to some of these challenges in the mayor's office. And I felt like, when Donald Trump got elected, I felt like all hands on deck. It is time for everyone to step up and do what we can to lead and to protect democracy and to make sure that cities are the place where good changes can happen, because things are in bad shape and getting worse in Washington, D.C., so it's time for cities to really lead. And I felt this tremendous duty and responsibility to be part of the constructive solution.
What would you say your top priorities as mayor are?
I think, there's several. First, we all know what the main challenges are of our city. So developing a really clear vision and action agenda and solution set for those main challenges, which are the housing affordability crisis, the homelessness crisis, which is getting worse, not better, the deep divide in income inequality, and the transportation and traffic issues. So those, I think, are the main issues on voters' minds. But I also want to look a little bit more deeply at how we share power, because one of the issues that's come up in our city, especially in the last few years with Block the Bunker and Black Lives Matter and EPIC and the People's Party and Nikita Oliver's campaign, is that we are simply not sharing power across race and class and gender. And we have to rebalance that, because once we get those solutions in motion and we get folks at the table who are representing different points of view, different lived experience, different understanding of the challenges, different solutions, only then can we really start breaking through from the limitations that we felt before and really build momentum towards real change and transformative solutions.
This is the first election cycle since the democracy voucher program has been adopted, which is helping to kind of shift away the power dynamic and move towards publicly funded campaigns. You have funded a lot of your own campaign with your personal funds, so how will you keep yourself accountable to your constituents, especially those lacking access to institutional resources?
Yeah. So first, I just want to shout out that I helped develop and support and pass Honest Elections Seattle, because I feel like the corrupting force of money in politics is one of the biggest challenges of our time. And so I worked not only at the city level with that team, putting that in motion, but also working at the state and on some national initiatives too around getting money out of politics. Because until the influence that people in power believe they have, the access and influence that they believe they deserve through their donations, we're never going to actually have the courage to implement bold solutions. And so I am a firm believer in getting money out of politics and restoring power to the people in democracy. So in a field of 21 candidates, as a first-time candidate who does not have a big Rolodex, what we used to call them in the old days, but I don't have a big list of donors, I don't have access to Ed Murray's list of donors, I am building support one person at a time. And so through the primary, I was able to build some momentum, which I matched with money from my own wealth, because I feel like I have this duty and responsibility to use my privilege, which I have. I acknowledge my privilege. I want to use it for good. And so I've spent the last 3 years of my life really focusing on investing my time, my energy, my capacity, and my resources in deep transformative solutions, because no one hires you to do that job. No one says, hey, we need someone to attack the problems in the housing market that are being caused by speculation. No one writes you a grant to do that. If you're going to do that work, you have to figure out how to do it on your own time, unless you work for a great media outlet that really does deep dives. So I've been working on solving these big problems on my own dime because I care so much about the city. And so while I wish I had been able to spend the time to build the grassroots movement and raise all that money from individual donations, I'm pretty proud of the momentum we have now as a first-time candidate who hasn't done this before. And the momentum we're building now and the power we're building now, I'm pretty proud of that. And until we change the system, until we get money out of politics and have publicly financed elections, like with vouchers for the mayor's race, we're up against the machine of corporations and donors who are on particular mailing lists that will go towards the kind of mainstream candidate. Like, I'm up against that, and I know I'm up against that, and so I have to do everything I can with my own resources and with the grassroots momentum I can build to try to match that. And I know we're going to be outspent 3-1, 4-1, 5-1, so we have to work smarter, and we have to work harder, and we have to build the momentum via word of mouth. We still have to do some paid media, because that's how you get some of the voters who are not that engaged and don't pay attention till the last minute. So we have to have enough money to do some of that, but we're really focusing on grassroots, word of mouth, and building support in community.
One of your main goals when you potentially become mayor is increasing accountability between the city and its residents. How do you specifically propose doing this?
So I think our last mayor, I'll just be blunt, had real trust issues. And he, over the 4 years he was mayor, shrunk the transparency and the availability of regular citizens to participate in government and to understand what was going on in government. And I want to go in the completely opposite direction. I want to lay out a vision and an action plan to address some of these key challenges, invite folks to be part of the solution, both city staff to bring their best ideas forward, council, folks from community and advocacy organizations, because the only way we're going to build shared commitment is to understand the vision, buy into the vision, and then work together to build the solutions. And so I want to be a lot more inclusive in that way, in collaborative around developing the solutions. And then I believe we need a lot more transparency. There has been just a lack of understanding of what's going on. So that means I want to do a lot more reporting back on here's how we're doing on pursuing these shared goals, which means identifying the metrics and the evaluation techniques for progress and then reporting back to citizens on how we're doing. And it also means, listening and being accountable. Like, here's how we plan to achieve a better balance of power and racial equity in the way we're governing. How are we doing? And listen, because that's the only way we're going to really change the culture in city government in Seattle, is by being accountable to and hearing folks when they say, you fell short, or why don't you try this, because that didn't work. And so I'm really ready to do that kind of listening to community.
Some of your policy proposals would rely heavily on increased state revenue being dispersed to Seattle, such as the capital gains tax we talked about. With our state legislature and gridlock, do you have a more immediate funding proposal to accomplish some of your goals?
Yeah, the capital gains tax is a way to raise revenue.
Right.
Okay. Your phrasing was a little odd.
Sorry.
I didn't understand. Okay. Immediate, I think we need to ask all department leaders throughout the city, what are we doing that's working that we need to scale up? What are we doing that's not working that we need to shut down? Because the budget has increased significantly, I think 25% in the past 4 years. And so we need to look at how we're spending money and make sure we are really investing effectively and efficiently. So I assume there's going to be some cost savings. I've already promised to reduce the staff in the mayor's office as one source of cost savings. It's not going to get a ton of money, but it's a sign of my commitment to operating a leaner, more efficient organization. Second, I think we need to look at a more steeply progressive B&O tax, where small, startup, locally owned businesses pay less in B&O tax, and large corporations that are generating tremendous wealth pay higher B&O tax. So that's something we can look at. I think I've talked a lot about housing affordability and how we need to stop the speculation that's part of increasing housing costs so quickly and so dramatically. Our housing costs are rising twice as fast as any other city. This is not natural. The housing market is not supposed to work like this. So I've proposed that we identify some disincentives to block speculation, and that might be a source of revenue, assuming we get, we've identified the dynamic and the right tool to block the dynamic. Is that a capital gains tax on sale of a non-primary residence? Is it an additional real estate excise tax on sale of luxury homes? Is it a tax on vacant properties or flipping properties, less than a certain amount of time after you bought them? So I've identified a bunch of things that we might be able to do locally that I want to try. I want to figure out which one is most legally viable and try that. So I think we've identified some things that might produce revenue for the city, and we need to pursue those as quickly as possible.
In the wake of a recent ICE raid in Seattle, how would you work to protect our undocumented community members from further threats to their safety and well-being?
Yeah, so this is so maddening. And, newcomers to our country, immigrants and refugees, deserve the rights and protection, the full protection of our government, and they are getting the opposite, and it's wrong. It's morally wrong. So what I would pledge to do as mayor is ensure that we are not sharing any data with the police, from the police force to ICE. Make sure that we do not ask documentation status when someone calls 911 or when someone is involved in an offense. And make sure that we have legal defense funding as needed. Lorena Gonzalez has put together a fund, I think it's $1 million. We have to watch that, make sure it's enough. I think we also need broader training throughout schools, any places where, advocacy organizations that work with immigrants and refugees, advocacy organizations that work with particular communities and populations. We've got to make sure everybody knows what to do and they're trained to protect folks who might be there for services or might be there, as volunteers or, employed there. So we have to make sure that all those folks know what to do as a frontline line of defense. And I think we need to keep pushing back on the Trump administration and keep saying, this is not what we stand for. These people are part of our community. These people have contributed to America since day one. We need to stand and protect them and not demean, belittle, make them go into hiding and create a culture of fear and insecurity for them. It's just simply wrong. And I fully support everything our Attorney General is doing to stand up to the Trump administration, and will stand with him and as an ally and as a collaborator whenever it becomes necessary for the city to get involved in what he's doing.
You've mentioned that you want to help the light rail expand more quickly to Ballard and West Seattle, and how do you propose that we speed up this process?
Yeah. So this is, the Sound Transit, of course. Sound Transit has to be involved in this decision. It has to be their decision. But I will push, excuse me, for them to more assertively consider, can we bond on the project development, create city bonds on the project development to get the money in sooner, because part of their long timeline is because the money arrives fairly slowly to the project. So can we use bonding capacity to speed up construction at the front end and deliver more project sooner? So this is an issue we have to work out with Sound Transit, but I would be an advocate for that and a champion for that and try to help make that happen on the Sound Transit Board. Second, the city has a particular responsibility for permitting, so I will make sure we are doing everything we can to get permitting done quickly and make sure that we are constructively involved in community process and the outreach that's necessary to get buy-in in their public process for station design and routing and siting in Seattle, because the less delay, the more we can build.
Jimmy Durkin proposed a plan entitled Seattle Promise, which would require the city to pay for 2 years of community college tuition for the city's public high school graduates. You said that you don't think the proposal went far enough. What would you do to help deal with education inequity?
Yeah. So our opportunity gap in our school system in Seattle is widening, and it's unconscionable. It is. We absolutely have to address this problem in pre-K through 12. And so the Families and Education Levy is a way that the city can work with the school system to ensure we are prioritizing closing the opportunity gap. And I am ready to work with, SPS, the community groups that are already engaged in this, all the groups that are actually doing the work, providing services to kids in low-income communities, as well as the teachers union, to really identify what investments are having the best results. And that means, not looking at high-stakes test scores as an evaluation metric, but really developing a different way to evaluate results that's based in actually helping individual kids. Because, if we invest in public health or health services for kids who don't have access to medical care, that's not going to show up in a test score, but that is going to show up in that kid thriving. And so we have to develop different evaluation metrics to identify where to invest money. So I believe we need to focus the Families and Education money on K through 12 or pre-K through 12 and not siphon off that money for a new program. I think that's the biggest difference between Jenny Durkin and me. I want to keep that money focused on K through 12, and if we want to do more in 13th year and 2 years of access to college, yes, great, let's do that, but we got to find a different funding source. We cannot poach from the insufficient funds we already have allocated for students up to grade 12.
In addition to working on long-term solutions to getting our homeless individuals inside, what do you propose to get them into shelter right now?
So we need more low-barrier shelters where you can come inside with a partner, with a pet, with a place to store your belongings, with your addiction to alcohol or drugs. We need places to invite folks to come inside. We also need more tiny house villages and sanctioned encampments, and we need to have a solution in place for how can folks who are living in their RV, the very last shelter that they have, in a way that's safe for them and for communities. And so I like Mike O'Brien's proposal for how do we create, I don't want to use the word park, but like an RV park where we identify public land or land that's owned by a nonprofit or a faith community and build a place where RVs can come park there, where they're not going to get ticketed, they're not going to get towed, and more importantly, they have access to sanitation, to water, to garbage pickup, and to the services they might need. So I think those are all three parts of the short-term solution of how do we invite folks inside and create a safe place for them. And then we can go and clean up the encampments that were left behind. But we have to have a place for people to come inside and not spend money on the sweeps, which is just chasing them from one location to another and throwing their lives into further chaos and sometimes danger. And I would work with service providers and with homeless folks themselves on identifying the best solutions, because folks who are homeless have a lot to contribute to this and want to be part of the solution, and we need to listen to them.
What specifically would you do to increase tenants' rights in Seattle?
That's a great question. I think we need to be doing more for eviction prevention, because a lot of folks who are just on the verge of getting evicted, if we could go in and offer them the help and support they need before they become homeless, that's essential. Second, I think we need to create a tenants' bill of rights that's easier for tenants to understand. We do have, a nice 4-page PDF that's useful, but let's get even drill down and get more specific and make sure all tenants understand their rights. I think, I haven't thought about this in a while, sorry. I think access to legal services is a big part of the solution too. Often when tenants are dealing with, unsafe conditions or code violations with a landlord who's not, meeting the standards, providing tenants access to legal services to get them the strength they need to back up their complaints and their arguments can really go a long way towards helping folks stay safe or stay in their place. And then I think we also need to look at, some prohibition on raising rents faster than a certain rate. Something like rent stabilization, I think, is a really good proposal that we need to be exploring. Look at best practices in other cities and propose something for Seattle, because, too many stories of folks whose rent has been increased 25, 30%. It's just maddening, because if you're just hanging on by your fingernails already and your rent's raised $300, what are you supposed to do? You can't afford to stay, and you don't have the savings you need to move. So I think something that requires, that rent stabilization and relocation assistance for rent increases above a certain rate is something that we need to look at.
You said that you wanted to scrap HALA and restart the process?
I haven't said that.
Sorry, I misspoke. Could you talk about your position on HALA?
Yes. So HALA was a good first step. And we do need developers who are building market rate housing to also build affordable housing. So the MHA requirements in HALA are a good first step. But if we do everything we can do in HALA that's been identified, it's going to build 6,000 units of affordable housing over the next 10 years. That is simply not enough. We are in crisis right now, and we need a lot more tools to build affordable housing more quickly. So I have proposed that we look at a tax or some disincentive to speculation, because that's part of what the problem is. I've proposed that we look at how do we get more money into the low-income housing pipeline. Right now the state's low-income housing trust fund is much lower than it has been in previous years. We need to get that back up to $200 million a year. We need to invite all the foundations, philanthropists, and donors to contribute to funding affordable housing. We need to look at surplus public-owned land and understand which of those sites, there's over 100 sites in our city that might be useful for either a tiny house village, a sanctioned encampment, or to build public or nonprofit affordable housing on. So we've got to be more assertive about how do we get that property back into public use or productive use. And we really need to look at the missing middle. We have a lot of single-family zoned land, more than we've ever had in the history of our city. And unless we have got to come up with solutions working with neighborhoods on how do we add more infill density in neighborhoods so that we can let the market rate housing developers build more different types of housing affordable to people at all income levels. Because we all want to create society that's welcoming and inclusive, and that means our neighborhoods have got to invite people at all income levels and ages and stages of life to be part of the community. We cannot have this economic apartheid like we have with high-end single-family neighborhoods. So we need to look at, with neighborhoods, how do we add infill development? So that might be duplexes, it might be stacked flats, it might be row houses, it might be backyard cottages, it might be clustered housing, it might be congregate housing, it might be co-ops and mutual housing, these different models of people living more communally on sites. And we also need to look at community land trusts, because long term we want to increase access to home ownership for more people, and the quicker our housing prices are rising, the harder that is to get to that first rung of the ladder. And so community land trusts are a great tool for that, because the nonprofit or public agency owns the land and the purchase is only for the house itself. And because most of the increase in value has been from the land, it's more affordable to just buy the house, not the land. And so community land trusts are a great part of the solution. So we need to get all the tools on the table and look at how each of them could work and increase and broaden the conversation with communities around what will work to increase development of affordable housing in your neighborhood. So when I say restart the process, I mean restart the dialogue with communities about what could work in your neighborhood. Because the way it was rolled out, it felt very top-down. It felt like a pronouncement from on high that this is what's going to happen in your neighborhood. We've already decided for you. And that makes people bristle in Seattle, which is the land of neighborhood planning and high involvement and the right to the city kind of ideal. We bristle at top-down decrees. And so we need to have a constructive conversation with neighborhoods around how to grow in a way that works for everybody.
How would you ensure that students are better represented in city politics?
That's a great question. I think, in my promise to increase and share power, or to share power across broader communities, I've often talked about young people too, and how do we invite folks from across race and class and gender and age and sexual orientation to have a seat at the table. And so for me, that means just making a commitment in the mayor's office and in departmental leadership positions that we need to assertively go out and attract and recruit talent from a broader base of our city. It means we need to use a racial equity lens in how we're investing city resources, and it means we need to double down on the race and social justice initiative, and which is the work being done deep inside, the policies and practices and procedures of city departments to make sure we're identifying, what the barriers are, who the gatekeepers are, what are the obstacles for participation, and make sure we're changing how we practice government at every single level. And so that goes towards, inviting young people into all the boards and commissions and being more proactive and intentional around listening and being accountable to a broader set of communities.
What would you say is the biggest difference between you and Jenny Dirk, and why do you think you would be a better fit for students at the UW?
So I have a background in urban planning, landscape architecture, urban design. So I've been working on urban issues for 20 years. I have deep expertise in working directly with city departments. I understand how departments work. I understand how commissions work. I understand how important the advocacy world is with city government and its operation. I have sort of a much deeper knowledge and a skill set around urban issues, especially around urban growth, and how do we build a city that's welcoming and affordable and diverse and really oriented towards shared prosperity for everybody. I've been working on these issues for 20 years, so I have deep knowledge and experience on these issues, ready to hit the ground running. Second, I think I have, with my commitment to sharing power across race, class, and gender, and part of that has been to say, I will limit access to big corporations to 1 day a week in order to make room for other voices. So I have made a strong commitment towards being accountable to and listening to a broader range of folks and sharing power with a broader range of people, which is threatening to the people who have access and influence right now. So I think we're seeing we're seeing a lot of folks who care about changing the way power works in the city come to my side. And I think that's in this era of, watching what happens when, special interests take over government at the federal level, I think people in Seattle are really concerned of how do we ensure that government is being accountable to the well-being of everyone and focused on the most impacted and focused on achieving real, racial equity and shared power. So I think those two reasons are the biggest differences between us, experience and commitment to shared power and changing the way we make decisions in the city.
Those are all the questions I have, but is there anything else you would like to add that you would want to say to students at UW?
Get involved, participate, run for office. We need an energized civic dialogue. We need smart solutions, and we need movements and strong momentum for change. And, it's easy to get checked out of politics because politics, frankly, doesn't work for a lot of people. I mean, politics is focused on often a certain set of issues and concerns that are not the issues and concerns of young people and people of color. So people check out and they're like, I want to make a better world, but I'm going to do it over here. I'm going to do it by working in advocacy or working in the nonprofit sector. We need folks also to run for office and be part of how government works, because the only way we can make these big systemic changes is both inside and outside government. So do both. Be inside and be outside. Participate and push, because democracy is at risk. Cities were the birthplace of democracy, and they are its future. And we really need to protect, sustain, and expand the good work we're doing in Seattle and be a real beacon of hope for the rest of the country. I think we have so much potential here, and you know, if we can't solve this problem, who can? So I think it's all hands on deck. We all need to help Seattle be a better city. So help, please come help.